What's up, Internet? You're tuning to episode 145 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where a few best buds from different nations come together to discuss Summer Game Fest. Again, that's what we're going to talk about today. On the fallout from it as well, I guess. But yeah, we're wrapping up Summer Game Fest this week. And of course, I am your host, Pete and Bessie, here to talk with my very good friends and co hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford
Hello, hello.
and Mr. Max Wright.
Happy post Summer Games Fest clarity, everybody.
Oh man. See, I thought you were gonna say like afterglow or something like that, and you picked the grossest euphemism possible. And that's what I appreciate about you.
Just how I'm feeling all the time.
It's just how I'm feeling. So yeah, if you haven't caught them already, this is episode 3 of our Summer Game Fest coverage. So 3 episodes of the podcast this week. We had both the Xbox and then like the SGF kickoff, like the main Jeff event. We covered both of those as individual episodes that are up right now. If you haven't checked them out already, you can go check that out. But today we're going to talk about some of the highlights from Ubisoft's event. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the aftermath of the Xbox event, as well as answer a bunch of questions from you, the listeners. So this is kind of like a Summer Game Fest grab bag, post-mortem, catch-all kind of episode. That's how I want to look at it today. But I we'll start with Ubisoft, right? I guess that's like kind of the quote unquote headline. Though I think most people walked away from it feeling a little cold.
Yeah, I didn't think there was too much personally to write home about. I would appreciate it if we could agree once again, Ubisoft.
It's Ubisoft.
Ubisoft.
What
Just
I
in
said,
case
I said Ubi, right?
Ubisoft. Remember, it's
I say
a
it like it's like
Ubisoft
Ube.
production. Yeah. But it's a Ubisoft production. Or
And like you're
original, sorry.
definitely right because it's ubiquitous software, so it's like it's definitely
I didn't know
Ubisoft,
that.
but
We're
I
all
say it wrong
learning
all the time.
together.
I,
Again,
I,
we have
I
had this
think it's
discussion.
because Eves comes out on stage and is saying Ubisoft in his,
Ubisoft 'cause
in
he's
his very
French.
French
Ubisoft.
accent.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Everyone from France says it that way. So I'm like, I don't know.
Must not have the rule of like an being before a vowel sound, a being before a consonant sound, whereas we have that. So I'm going to do that. But yes, as I was saying, not a ton here personally for me because they didn't show anything new. Like just a holistic look at the whole thing. They didn't show anything
Yeah.
brand new really. Like there was a couple of little tidbits. There was some stuff that we didn't know about, but nothing like here's one more thing.
Yeah, it was. I think it was one of those things where if you were excited about some of the games they had to show, then there was good stuff to see, right? Like we saw a good like 13-minute chunk of both Star Wars Outlaws and Assassin's Creed Shadows, and like they had a good bit about Prince of Persia. They had some new stuff to show about like Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. And again, right? Like I think if those are not your bag or like, you're not paying attention to those games, then yeah, there wasn't a big sexy headline by any stretch. But I think if if one of those is a game that's highly on your radar or maybe you're on the fence about, right? Like I do think that they had some pretty good stuff to show. That said, so I will give them that. We did have somebody from the community, Andy Rads, wrote in and said, I enjoyed UB Forward. It had more of an E3 feel about it with the live audience where the PlayStation and Xbox ones were quite sterile. I love the audience reactions. That was, I think, the thing I was most struck by was how much this felt like an old E3 presentation
I agree
versus
with you.
Summer Game Fest.
And I think that's why I expected more from it because it felt like that. And they had the bands in, they had the orchestra, they had the sort of Japanese band doing the drums. So, because of that sort of caliber, because they put the extra effort in to give that that old E3 feel, I think I was expecting like, oh, they're spending money here. They must have some shit to show.
Even the trailers, right? Like there was
updates.
multiple trailers that had that like, this is an E3 presentation, and I'm your game director, Pete and Bessie, to talk to you about the FlipScreen Games podcast.
Yes.
And it's like,
And
I'm not like, that's not a critique, but it's like, it does feel very out of place with, I think, a lot of the other presentations that we enjoyed this week, or
it
watched.
reminds me a lot of E3 as well, where they show a piece of footage that I'm not having much of a reaction to. I'm like, okay. And then someone on screen, whether it be a fake multiplayer voice or a streamer, is going, "Oh my god, I've got goosebumps!" And
yeah,
like,
right. That's
what?
another like classic type of trailer that you don't really see anymore. Where it's like, here's a bunch of streamers playing this game, like, oh
like
baby,
yeah, it's like Don't tell me how to feel. Make me feel that with your trailer. Like, what are you doing?
Sure. I feel like, I'm more open to that in a multiplayer game.
Mhm.
If it's, like,
Something you
Well,
need to
I don't
sincere.
happen.
know though, like, I constantly remember the Anthem
Oh,
reveal
don't,
and, like,
don't.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
and I said, it's gotta be
scripted
sincere.
dialogue.
It's gotta
Good
be
god.
sincere, right? Like, if you have, footage of a bunch of people that, like, are, recognizable personalities, like, playing the game and visually like, visibly having fun, I think that does kinda convey something well, but otherwise, it
mhm,
always does feel very, like, packaged, you know?
Mhm.
mhm. It's just to Andy's words, it makes it feel more sterile. It makes it feel more like by committee, like, oh, this person that people like reacted this way. So now if we show this, we've created a reaction in a boardroom almost.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny
that's
because
not my
like,
favorite way to do it.
I kinda see what Andy's saying where, like, there is something to the, I think that is a fun element of SGF and, like, the Game Awards is, like, being in a live audience and getting to hear people react and, like, that is
Hmm.
cool. And, I mean, I think that there's a reason that people like the Nintendo Direct format and you see Xbox and PlayStation aping it, where it's, like, having something that's, like, a produced video that you can just put out rather than having to, monkey with, you know, getting a live event space and inviting a bunch of
Mhm.
people out there and making sure that everything goes off without a hitch and,
And they
like.
and they still did do that for the Xbox presentation, but it was just a pre-recorded video that they were showing to, like, a press audience. But
Yeah, and that just it
I
eliminates so much of the,
well, you
variable.
don't end up with someone like Michael Bay coming out on stage and, like, forgetting his words and then walking off, there's, like, all sorts of, like, crazy things that can happen when it's a live audience, and we saw that at Jeff's show. There was a couple of people that came out on stage and were clearly nervous and forgot their
Hmm.
words while they were talking to Jeff, and, he had to prompt them
Yeah,
and stuff, but
and it's like, that happens, and I do think that there's, like, a benefit to both kinds of shows, and I feel like, you know, there are drawbacks, I guess, to both, right? Because I think
yeah.
to Andy's point, like, I can understand feeling like the Xbox show is maybe sterile in comparison because, like, there isn't as much personality because it's like there's not really anybody talking, right? Like, it's like
But they did do
Yeah.
the deep dive into Call of Duty, which was kind of that format. It was like
more
the
of the,
developer
like,
direct
developer
format,
direct.
yeah,
Yeah.
which I like, which is similar to what they showed with like Star Wars at the Ubisoft event, where they
Mhm.
had like a director talking over the game and
Yeah.
explaining it. But
And it's like, I can kinda
I
see
like the
why.
new format. I don't want them to go back to audiences. I find it very very like off-putting at times, and I like the pace. You can get a really good pace when there's no live audience, and I think that's the thing we got from the Xbox show. It's like, wow, this is so well paced, and you compare that to Jeff's show where they've got to coordinate people coming on and off stage. He's got to get like maybe live music out.
Hmm.
There's all sorts of the like logistical things that slow down a live show.
I mean, I think you really felt that during the Ubisoft presentation where, like, and we'll get to the meat of, like, what was shown in a minute here, but I felt that often, right? And I watched it time shifted, so I was able to even, like, skip around if I wanted to. But even so, like, there were definitely moments where I was like, "Oof," like, even Star Wars Outlaws, right? Like, in my notes, I made a joke about how, it was very funny that it was like, "Okay, here's Star Wars Outlaws. Here's like a look at it, right? Like, here's an extended look at gameplay. We're gonna do like a whole breakdown with the director talking over it, deep dive, like that classic format. Then after that, the director comes out on stage to talk more about the game, and then they showed another trailer, and then there was a post event footage as well. So that means there was 4 different, like, reveal, gameplay, trail like, whatever you wanna call them, and it just, like, hit a point where I'm just like, "Damn, like, this is
Yeah.
what did this need to be 2 hours?" Like, it's like, I think you could have easily had this been an hour and showed like, all of the big stuff that I think played well, um, and,
And then have
like,
the
and
rest as a VOD for after the case.
yeah, yeah, and let that be
Oh,
the post show if that's what you're gonna do, if you're gonna do a post show.
Yeah. Thing with the
eh,
live shows that I've noticed is that there's a lot of like moments of it's clips of panning around an audience while some like dad rock while they like just pan at the audience while they're clearly setting something up. And it's
yeah.
like, come on, like why this could just be going dunk, here's a trailer, dunk, here's a trailer, or at least just have another trailer and set that up in the background. You don't have to like finish Jeff talking, look to camera, and then have like 5 seconds of people panning going, woo, where it's like bill before cutting to an advert. Immediately cutting to an advert as well. Classic. At least you didn't have that with the Ubisoft thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's juggling a live event is definitely a
Mhm,
challenge, and like I think there's a reason to do it and to not do it. I think to Steve's point, like if you have a lot of stuff to show, like Xbox did, I like appreciated the more like, let's just focus on trailers and on showing you gameplay because we have a
mhm,
lot to talk
Yeah,
about. Whereas, like,
and
in a slower year, like, maybe you do wanna take more time and do a deeper dive and let the directors come out and talk, and, like, that can be entertaining if it's executed well, which is, like, I thought the Star Wars Outlaws stuff, it was long, but it looked really good. I thought it was a good presentation, and it,
mhm,
like, answered all of the questions that I think, me as somebody who, like I said the other day, right? I was like, I don't need more. I don't need to see more of this game. I'm already into it. I think they could have showed too much and left me feeling like, damn, I've seen so much of this now. Like, it spoiled things for me. And I don't think it did that. I think they did a good job of answering the questions I had as a player
mhm.
and even answering some that I didn't know that I had just by like
mhm.
talking more about the game systems and getting more into like the
Oh,
nitty gritty.
you saw the lock picking minigame, and you're like, "I'm all in. I'm
I
on
didn't get
board."
that.
Like, that's a
I
great
was like,
thing
"What
though,
did
right?
they
Like,
do?"
that was, like, a great example of what I'm talking about, where it's like, you don't necessarily, like, highlight that in a, "Oh, like, there's a lock-picking mini game," but, like,
Mhm.
it gave me an idea of what I'm doing moment to moment when it's like, you're infiltrating a base and you gotta make sure you don't get caught, and it's like, "Okay, cool. Like, what am I doing in that segment of gameplay?" And now I have a
Yeah, I
really good
appreciate
idea
that.
of how that plays out, right?
I
And
appreciated that more than we were talking about the game, set on the is it Louisiana? I can't remember what the game is called, but you're sort of riding the giant catfish, and then when it cuts to the gameplay, it's like, oh, there's stretches of nothing, and then there's fighting and the stretches of nothing. Whereas this very much
yeah.
did like a longer section where it's like there's things that are happening, but also there's sort of things happening, and then you do other things, but in the downtime you're still doing stuff. If that makes sense, it's not just straight up like we're walking from point to point to show
Yeah,
you.
I think we spoke about a game on,
South
the
of Midnight is
Xbox
the name of
One.
that game, by the way.
That was the one.
Yeah,
That's the
Thank you.
one, yeah,
and we
yeah,
were
yeah.
just like, what are we gonna do, like,
Yeah,
in this
that's the game
game?"
I'm talking about,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas, I agree with you, and I loved like, seeing the stuff like factions, like,
Mhm.
being pissed off with you when you trespass and stuff like that, and, like
Yeah, the updating it as it
The
happens is
the way
cool.
that
yeah.
that's, like, woven into, like, every element of the game, I thought was really cool too, because it was like they did kind of a lot of jumping around, but it was like there's this quest where, you're trying to get information, and that's why you're breaking into this base, right? And you can get in and out stealthily and not have it impact your reputation at all, or you can get captured or whatever, right? And, like, depending on how sideways it goes, that influences your reputation. They showed how there'll be like opportunities like mid-story beats where you could like double cross somebody or or like double down, right, and stay loyal to a group. Or like they showed how each planet and like the kind of area surrounding it that you can explore in your ship will have these like um what's the word I'm looking for, like
Dogfights?
dogfights, but yeah, but um, not static world events, right? Like, it
Oh, I
was like you
see,
went out
yeah,
and it was like,
yeah.
"Oh, there's this ship and it's getting
Oh,
attacked
yeah,
Spontaneous
by
like
where
a
pirates."
dynamic encounter kind of
yeah,
thing,
Thank
yeah,
you,
isn't
yeah,
yeah,
it?
yeah.
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 And, like, how you could do that, and, yeah, you'll get, whatever resources you get from fighting those ships, but also it'll influence how that one faction feels about
Mhm,
you. Like, it was cool to see that, like, almost every gameplay, mechanic or, like, system that they explored tied back to that broader faction system and how
mhm.
it influences story, but also it influences, like, oh, every shopkeeper you meet has, like, an allied faction. So if you're like on a planet and you need resources and you fuck them over, like they're gonna jack up the prices and like
Yeah.
things like
I
it's like,
mean,
oh, that's really
as the
cool, you know?
I couldn't help but think as I was watching this, that I really wish Starfield had had a lot of this stuff in there, and, like,
Mhm.
how much better that game would have been if it had adopted some of these kind of systems, and the fact that this is out August 30th. We're probably gonna see the DLC for Starfield around the same time, and I just feel so bad for, like, the the Starfield team,
Mm.
with Star Wars coming out and it looking this good. Like, I'm so excited about this game. I was excited when when they first showed it, but seeing a lot more of the things that you can
It
do in
looks
the game.
really good.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful. It looks like an absolutely gorgeous
It does
game
look
to
good.
just run
And
around
like
in.
also just like I really loved the environments. Like, like they showed the part where like So this was one of the other things that this was like a new thing that they revealed, which was that like one of the kind of big things that you're doing are going and finding these like experts who you can get special skills from or like upgrade your character or whatever your loadout. And like that all feeds back into the main story of like you're trying to pull off this heist because you owe money to someone that's going to kill you if you don't, complete this job. So that was, I thought, like a kind of a clever way to kind of weave character progression and like side missions into like the broader narrative as well. But so they show you like looking for this expert, you're like exploring Tatooine and like you can go to like the Mos Eisley Cantina and everything. And they were showing like, okay, here's this like environment that you've seen right in the original Star Wars, and it's like so well known and well explored. But it's like there's all these areas around it that like you never would have, like all these back alleys and all these cool little things where it's like that to me is a great way to do fan service and like IP stuff well, where it's like,
Mhm.
you can have that moment where you're like, oh, like that's really cool. And I appreciate that. But also it's not like, here's a cameo from Han Solo, right? Which, like, kinda takes you
Yeah.
out of it, right? It makes the world feel smaller, not bigger. Um, so I thought that was really an interesting thing as well, like, just seeing how detailed the environments feel and how, like, there's, like, almost every shot had some NPCs having some kind of interaction that was not relevant to what you were doing or to the story. It's just like adding color and texture
Mhm.
to the world, which is what is so cool about like the next gen console or current gen consoles now, like being able to handle more models on screen,
Hmm.
and having like little, alleyways and everything like filled with all these shady characters, like
Mhm.
makes it feel so alive.
I just want to hop back to what you said about how like they did tie the main plot line in by you're supposed to be you've got a heist to pull off, you're trying to get things that make this heist easier. Sort of reminds me of like the way Breath of the Wild is set up, or what's the ukulele sequel? Ukulele and the I
Oh,
can't remember what it's
shoot.
called. Something Lair, the Something Lair, Impossible Lair,
And yeah,
Yeah,
where
that's it.
Impossible
Yeah.
Lair. Yeah, that's it.
like you can go straight to the end of the game. I don't know if this is the case, but it sounds like you got to pull off this heist, you'll fail unless you do get all this stuff. Where
Enough
like
of these,
In
yeah.
Breath of the Wild, you can just go straight to the end, but it's 10, like 50 times easier if you actually just play through the game first. And same with the Impossible Lair, you could just beat the game. And if the way that they describe that is, it's like, yeah, you've got to do this heist, but you have to do all of this stuff first to make it easy for you. And I hope that's the way it's laid out, and it's not going to be like a linear thing because it's an open world. There's choices and all this stuff, and I do hope that it is like work out, go around, do all this stuff because it just feels more natural, more
It
diegetic to
seems
sort
that
of play
way,
that
like,
way.
because they were saying that, like, the way that you find out, like, where the experts are, like, seems like you can get the information in multiple different ways, like, they were like, you could, like, talk to a bartender and, like, get a lead, or you might overhear somebody in town, or you might find that information, like, in a base that you broke into or whatever. So I think, like, the idea of those events feeling like they are naturally spinning out from an action that you're taking, I think is like that's really clever. And I mean, we'll see, right? Like how authentic and how um branching it actually feels. And like I think if we all, play this game at the same time and then we're like, oh, like I found this way. Oh, really? Like I had that
Mhm,
interaction. Like I think that will probably
Yeah, imagine if we all had the exact same thing happen at the exact same time, and then the illusion is shattered for
yeah.
everyone.
mm,
And it's like, that's possible, but I also think that, like, illusion of choice is not inherently a bad thing if it
No.
feels good. Like, if it feels like you're making
Yeah,
a
that's
big
like,
decision, it's like, alright, like, that sometimes works, you know?
mhm. Yeah, and I would imagine in this case, depending on which faction you align with or who you've pissed off or who is your friend, maybe your friends will give you information, whereas like, enemies might want to hide that from you. I think there's probably going to be a lot that kind of plays into it.
That's the thing I'm most interested in is, like, how much do those things lead to branching paths,
Hmm.
right? Like, is it like, okay, there's this static event, right? And there are 5 factions, we'll say, I don't know how many there are. Um, and I sided with this faction, and this faction hates me, and it's the opposite for you, so when I play this mission, these people help me versus those people are it's like, how many shades are there within those, like, paths that you're gonna color in? I think is kinda my big question, but that's also, you know, nothing we saw here led me to think that is going to be shallow. And they talked a lot about that over and over about how much that's kind of the core thing. So, I mean, we'll see, but they're saying the things I wanted to hear. So
Mhm.
it definitely left me feeling pretty good. Um, I think they also did a good job of like showing off some more of Nyx's abilities because like they showed that a little bit in that first gameplay reveal that we got, and like they kind of did a I think a good job of fleshing out like all the different kinds of like little ways that you can have him interact with environments or like NPCs and like how integral his abilities seem to be to you navigating things. I thought was interesting. Like in that one area, it was like almost every item there was like his icon was popping up, and there was like something you could have him do.
He
Um,
seems OP. He can do everything. He can do literally everything.
yeah, he's a tough little dude.
I think the best thing about the Star Wars universe, I think, are the silly little guys that do things for you, whether it's BB-8,
Yeah,
whatever. Can't even see him actually, but whatever all their stupid
BD1.
little names are. BD1, that's who I'm trying to think of. All of these little silly little dudes that just go off and have their own little do their own thing. They're all super powerful. They're all just like godlike powers. But they're just cute. So that's my favorite bit.
I love
Some of the
goofy little
droids
guys.
didn't look cute in that video. You know, when they're shooting at you, I was not a fan of
Yeah, but they're
those.
full size droids. I'm talking
Yeah.
like babies that
Oh, yeah,
Cute
yeah.
little guys.
yeah, the cute little guy.
Little
Yeah, the
shoulder
dude, the
guy.
dude
Do
who's
they
like
have a name? Like the difference between C-3PO and R2-D2? Like, are the little ones called something else other
yeah, you
Yeah,
than
got the
they're
protocol
BD.
droids. You got
You mean
pro
like the one from Jedi? Like Jedi Fallen Order? Like
No, like, the difference between, like, the humanoid one and the ones that are, like, on wheels, do they have, like,
Yeah,
different
protocol
names?
droids, R2 units. Then you've got the gonks, gonk droids. Is that
yeah,
right?
like each one has a different designation for what type of unit it is, but then each
Mm.
individual unit also has its own name.
Okay.
So you
But,
can
like,
look at
so when we call the small, cute little dudes, what are they actually called?
well,
Versus, like, the scary humanoid
that's
ones?
just a general term for like
Okay.
R2D2, BD1. So it could be the R2 units, the BD units, the BB units, the gonks. Which I don't like the word gonk. It sounds like a slur. I don't
Eh,
like it.
yeah.
It's the way I'm saying it. I think it's the hard G, the hard K.
The British accent doesn't help, you know?
Yeah, because it's filled with malice anyway. Like there are people that would say any word and make it sound like a bad thing. Um, yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Steve, you made the joke last week that you're like, I feel like they can only turn us off at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like they did the opposite for me. Like they
Yeah.
doubled down that this is a game I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah, agreed. I think you're just gonna have a very difficult fall to contend with, another game that we'll talk about. Maybe on this show, maybe in a short.
There's so many games
Sorry,
coming out in the next couple
did you
months,
say
honestly. It's nuts.
what word did you just use then, Steve?
Autumn, Max,
Thank you.
autumn. There you go.
Fool. All right. So next up we had a little Prince of Persia like rock block here. I the big headlines were Prince of Persia Lost Crown is getting its first DLC called Mask of Darkness that's coming in September.
Yeah,
The
boy.
Rogue Prince of Persia, which is the roguelike game that like entered early access a couple weeks ago, that has a new update called the Temple of Fire that's adding a bunch of new content. And then they re-revealed slash announced Sands of Time remake with a release date of 2026.
That's
Does it look the
crazy.
same? I missed this
That's
announcement. Does it look the
crazy.
same?
There's no trailer. It's just
Didn't show
literally just
anything.
like
It
the
was literally
logo.
just logo
They
sizzle kind
started
of.
Yeah.
again then. They
They
started
Yeah,
again.
really
definitely.
yeah,
They
they
started
started
it
again
over.
so they started again back in like 2022, I wanna say, and then 2023, they were like, "We've achieved a milestone," which, when I read that, I thought, "Cool, it'll be out in the next, like, year or so," not that this sort of 6-hour PS2 game is taking 6 years
Well, the
to
milestone
develop.
was taking the folder with the game in and dragging it to the recycling bin, and then right-clicking and clicking empty recycling bin, and
Yeah,
that was the
that's
milestone they hit
yeah.
then.
It is crazy to me that this game is taking so long, and I also feel like to then come at this again to have shown a trailer in 2021 that was bad. It was a bad trailer. It was embarrassing. Like the visuals were awful. It just lost the tone. Whatever. To then come out 3 years later than that, we're not with like a new trailer of like, look, we fixed it. Here's all the stuff that to come out with just like here's a picture of a candle
Still working
that's
on
going
it.
backward. Yeah, and then
Look,
to give us the logo and then make the logo white on a black background, like every logo really just takes a lot of the character out of it, and I think that's what I'm still worried about this game is it might lose its identity. Like they took its identity away in the first trailer. This time they've sort of, if anything, just gone like, "Hey, don't worry, it's gonna be all like it's gonna be more modern." You know, they're not saying I don't know. It's just I'm worried about it. And I played through the original again this year, and I enjoyed it, and I feel like when I played through it, I was like, "This should be so easy to do because it's all here. It's all here."
Unless they're changing a lot of mechanics, like
Could
they
be.
could have gone in and been like, we really want to modernize this because it does feel dated whenever I've gone back and tried to
My
play it.
guess is that's what happened, is that, like, they were originally doing more of a straight up port, and then they were like, like, this isn't aging that well, right? Or, like, whatever, right? For whatever reason, like, that port was just not it, and it feels like they hard restarted development, and I think not to say that, your reservations or your concerns are unfounded, Max. I think the one thing I would say is my hope is that the fact that they gutted it and started over is hopefully,
Mm,
Well, I
uh
also, I
shows that
also
they know that they need to get it right, and
mhm.
fingers crossed, right?
I also think the success of Lost Crown has just, gone to show the kind of momentum that the Prince of Persia series has,
yeah.
and they're gonna wanna invest
They're
that back
clearly
in. Yeah,
trying to really bring it back in a big,
yeah,
meaningful way, and
They've released
if they
2
get
games
this
this year.
right, that's it, right? Like, this is the thing. This is the thing that if you
Name
nail it, it's back.
name me another franchise that's released 2 games in 1 year that isn't Pokemon. Like, they've
Mario? Can we count
okay,
Mario?
alright, yeah, we can count that, but, like, I mean, these are huge franchises, not dormant Prince of Persia that hasn't done
Yeah.
anything for, like, 12 years, and now all
It's
of a sudden
very
it's had
weird.
2 games. It is strange, but, like, I'm all for it. The just to hop back quickly, the DLC I'm very interested in for The Lost Crown, and when they started playing the trailer for, like, the chat, I didn't so I must have been half paying attention to this roadmap because I was like, "Cool, the first interesting bit of content's coming out with the story DLC." But the, challenges, the new like, the combat encounters, the new, speed run things, the new,
Like,
like,
platforming
platforming
challenges.
challenges, that all looks great, like, it makes me wanna go back to it, but it's like we've said twice, I think, already in the last 3 days when we spoke about this, if you're gonna do a DLC like that, I'd rather it come out quickly after the game's come
Yeah,
out, because now I don't know how to play the game, and if I'm gonna try and dive in and do this extra hard content, I need to play the game again. So I now I'm gonna wait until this story DLC comes out, play through that, and then when I'm at my peak ability, uh, I will, you know, be able to go through these challenge dungeons because I don't like it. I'm not. This won't be long. Don't worry. When Blasphemous DLC first came out, I remember being like, "Cool, time to play that," and the Messenger did the same thing. "Cool, time to play that," and I booted up the game, and it was like, "Cool, in order to access this DLC, you have to beat the final boss again." I was saved directly in
Oof.
front of the final
Again,
boss.
why?
Yeah, like because like, I guess, like, story-wise, they're like, "Haha," but, like, I've already beaten the final boss 6 to 8 months ago. I now need to be good enough to beat what was already a challenging boss for someone who was living and breathing that game at the time. How am I supposed to play somebody who's never played it? And I hope that, you know, that this doesn't make me do that, so I can actually enjoy the content. Rant over, let's go back to some good stuff.
And then, like I said, there's the new content for Rogue Prince of Persia. That's obviously in early access, still cooking. So, if
Yeah,
you checked it out, there's gonna be some new stuff. So go check it out again.
I'm gonna pick this up at some point.
So then next up, we got to look at Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora's. I don't know if this is the first. It was called the next big story DLC. I don't think there's been another DLC, but
Me
who
neither.
knows? July 16th is when that one's coming out. So it's right around the corner, and I think this game is an interesting one where I think if I cared about that IP even like at all, I probably would be down to mess around with this game because it's basically just Far Cry. And Steve and
Mhm.
I have been asking for like a new good Far Cry, and by all
Well,
accounts, it's pretty okay. Like it sounds like it's a by all accounts a fine game, a fun game. But yeah, I mean it looks cool, but I don't know. I'm just not invested in that
I don't like
IP or that world.
Avatar. No, me neither. But we need to talk about the fact that Massive is really just like Ubisoft's shining star and jewel in the rough at the moment, making Star Wars Outlaws while also churning out a new DLC for Avatar's Frontiers of Pandora, and God knows what else they've got cooking as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they cancelled that um Division game that they were working on. And I think that was the right call to work on, bigger titles like this and invest the time there. That seems like the right thing to do.
Do I does every game need to have, like I tweeted this yesterday midway through the presentation. Does every game need to come out and have multi-year support? Does every game need to have a roadmap? Does every game need to do we need to have like, "Oh, here's season 4 and we've got content right up to season 8 in year 2," and it's like, "Oh, that's
Unless you wanna pay $100 for a game, I think it does, yeah.
okay, that does that you yeah, that does make
Yeah.
sense to me."
It's tough. I mean, I think it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because it's like I think, I would rather have season passes that deliver, like, single player content rather than, like, shoving in microtransactions or, again, like, driving up the price of games or whatever, right? Like, I don't think it's a perfect solution because I definitely, um multiple people in our audience have talked about this, and it's certainly something that I think we've all experienced where, like, a game you like has DLC, but you just don't ever play it because you've
Mhm.
moved on.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think it's also the kinda thing where part of it is that, like, thing that, like, games don't ever stop selling, and it's always new to somebody, and there's always a chance to pull somebody in for the first time or whatever, right? And, yeah, I think a lot.
Specifically with Ubisoft games, I never buy them at launch, like, if I'm not really hyped on the game, because it's gonna go down, like, 50% off within a few weeks. Like, I don't th their games plummet in
Or
value
that
so
or that you
quickly.
can wait for something like this, right? That'll, like,
Yeah.
have more content or whatever, but, I also think it's, like, some people, like, are always gonna be jumping into it, right? Like, there's probably a lot of people that, like, forgot this game came out and are like, "Oh, cool, maybe I'll get," "Oh, it's in July, maybe I'll get it now," right? And then that'll be the first time they pick it up? So then the last big release, that we got, to talk about, and again, there was, like, a lot of stuff we're skipping over, a lot of, like, updates to their ongoing games. We're not gonna talk about season 2 of, uh,
The
the
Crew. The
Well, oh,
Crew
there you go, sure.
something.
I was like, I'm trying to think of it. I was gonna make fun of the pirate game, and I can't even remember what it's called.
Oh, Skull and Bones. Oh, well, sorry.
What the
You
fuck
just
was
your
that?
brain just shorted out. You were like, "Ugh, ugh,
I had something I wanted to say, but, like, it was so much just, like, pure vinegar and hate that I just couldn't get it
ew,
out without
brother."
so, the Skull and Bones, oh, in my head, this is like it was like a realistic pirate thing for some reason. Don't know why. And then when like the season 2 stuff started, and I was like, are they like megalodons and dragons? Like what this game is, or this looks like like year 2 of a Call of Duty game. This doesn't look like a season 2 of a game. Like it's like how Fortnite's like as the way it is now, but already where like you can have like dragon ships and it's like, God, like how have they just jumped
Please
the
play
shark
this
again?
game. Please, please play it.
Yeah,
Please.
I just it's a shame they had that, like, that deal. Was it with the Singapore government?
It was the,
Or
the
Indian
Singapore government, they, like,
yeah,
had to put it
where
out because they, like,
they are
invested money in
screwed.
it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
damn.
So, the other game, that we got a nice, deep dive on was Assassin's Creed Shadows. This one got another musical number, and then, we got a long talk from the lead developer, and then we got a deep 13-minute gameplay slice,
Mm.
which I thought, again, right, like, the framing of it is maybe a little too old school E3. Like, I don't know that we needed a musical number and 3 minutes of dialogue before we got to see the game. But I think what they actually had to show of the game actually looked really good.
Mhm. I
I
agree
think
with
this
that.
is by far the most interested I've been in an Assassin's Creed game since like Black Flag. Um, I think the like dual protagonist thing is cool. The fact that they both have like fundamentally different combat styles and that they showed this point where it's like here's the story beat, do you want to play as the samurai or the assassin, right? And how seeing how the assassin's gameplay went, it's like, oh, that would obviously be totally different if you played this other character and just kicked in the
Mhm.
front door, right? So I think that's like a really cool interesting way to go about it. And yeah, I found myself like vibing with it in a way that I didn't really expect to. I might
Same.
I might bite on this one. Like, I'm such a sucker for that as a setting when it is right and it looks nice. I like that it's like a more grounded historical fiction rather than
Mhm.
the supernatural stuff that we've been seeing a lot of lately. Like, I don't know. Maybe.
I think there was a lot of this that I did like, and I think Yasuke, like, walking around like Batman almost in this, like, suit of armor, all sort of, like, nonchalant, and then that gets, like, the big like the I don't know what it is, like a big long mace. It was a whatever it is, it's a
Yeah,
cool weapon.
it was like a blade, but instead of being sharp, it had, like,
It's blunt with spikes and
yeah,
very
so
cool.
obviously you could crush armor, right? Like,
Yes, yeah,
yeah.
all of that stuff looks very cool. The ninja stuff looks cool. I think it's doing a lot of stuff right, and I think that it is taking a different approach my worry was just gonna be, "Okay, it's another game in Japan." It's taking a different approach, and I like that. I still don't know that they've learnt their lesson from the previous couple of Assassin's Creed games where it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, there's a lot of content to contend with here, a lot of, like, filler here." And I think I'm gonna wait to get this one on sale, but I do wanna play it just because I like the look of the 'cause, Assassin's Creed games in the past have been stealthy, and then you play, like, Origins, where it seems to be it was a lot sort of like,
It's like an RPG at that point.
yeah, slowly the combat slowly got, like, slower and more you're playing, what was the most recent one? Valhalla, and, you've got your shield, and you're a Viking, you're a big, like, lumbering person. Whereas now it's sort of almost gone they've taken that to the extreme and then bonked it right back to sort of
Yeah.
nimble and fast, and, like, it's interesting.
My biggest question is actually, like, to your point, is about the scope because, like, I feel like we've had this interesting trajectory now where it's like I feel like Assassin's Creed is, like, diverging, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
they're continuing to make the big, it's more open world RPG, like, hundreds of hours of stuff, but then they also just put out that game that was like, this one's a smaller, like, throwback to, like, the classic style of game. This kind of feels like between those to me. Like, it didn't feel like a big open world game. It felt more like narrative, linear, like kind of the old ones. And I'm wondering if it's going to be more on that side of the fence. And this is like a
Yeah.
20, 30 hour story driven thing rather than a, 100, 200 hour, like get lost in the world kind of thing.
Did we see any mounts? I can't remember if we saw any
I don't think we
mounts,
did.
which is a good sign for that, I guess.
Yeah.
My
And
worry
again, what
wasn't
we
based on
saw
what
was
they've
like the stuff in the town fed right into that next scene later that
Mm.
night, right? And it's like, oh, like that feels very like story beat kind of
Yeah.
game, you
My
know?
worry wasn't based on what we saw, it was based on Ubisoft as a company and, like, just the macro of everything they do. I was
Yeah.
worried about that sort of stuff, but, if they have, pared it down a bit or they have sort of met somewhere in the middle of it's not
Yeah, I
a
wonder.
10-hour Mirage, it's not a 70-hour Valhalla, it's somewhere in the middle and yeah, I mean, whether it then you gotta worry about price though at that point. But then again, all the games are the same price and they get very cheap very quickly, so maybe it's not that big an issue.
I'd be very happy with a 10-hour game, especially with Assassin's Creed Infinity on the horizon, right? Where this could potentially be one of the games or levels you can kind of hop into and dart between multiple different timelines and stuff. I think I've not played a game other than Hitman that's been able to successfully execute that kind of style, and I think Assassin's Creed could really do it well, especially
Mhm.
with the lore of you going into those little pod things and going back in time to specific events and stuff.
Animus.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. This one is interesting to me, right? Like Assassin's Creed is something a franchise I definitely used to care about, but I've been so out of it for so long. And even when they've caught my attention, it usually is kind of a passing thing. This game though, like I watched it, I've thought about it quite a bit since I watched this, and I don't know. It's one I think if November rolls around and there's not something else vying for my attention,
Wow.
I might
We
give it a shot.
we saw this week on the Obsidian blog that they then quickly took down after about 10 minutes that Avowed is allegedly out November 12th. So,
Allegedly.
yeah, you're potentially contending with that. You've also got Dragon Age. You've also got Indiana Jones. So there's a lot of games kind of kicking out around
Yeah,
that
but it's like
period.
those 2 we don't have hard dates on yet, so it's like, who know like, if those come out in, you know, October, right, September, like, I mean, some of them Dragon Age is probably gonna be one that you're playing for longer, but Indiana Jones might not be, right? Like, that's
Mhm,
probably like a 30, 40 hour, maybe 20 hour, right? Like, more traditional
Mhm.
story kinda thing. Avowed is probably also shorter, right? Like, I'm imagining that's gonna be similar in length to something like Outer Worlds, which was, like,
mhm.
more of a 40, 50 hour experience if you do everything, so, not to say that there's not other stuff for it to be competing with, but, I don't know. It might be okay. It might be okay. It's interesting though. You're right. There's definitely the back half of this year is a lot more stacked then
It's the same as last year. I felt the exact same way last year.
yeah, the whole front half of the year, it's kinda like, what's going on? What's going on?" But even that, there was more big releases, right? Like, we had Tears of the Kingdom, we had,
Yeah, but I think everyone kind of got out the way for Tears of the Kingdom, and then
Mm.
yeah.
shoved everything in the back half. And
Well, I don't know about you guys. I've been knackered this year. I'm already burnt out. I've not played anything in like 3 weeks, maybe like 2 weeks, just because I'm just like
no,
really
yeah,
done 120 hours of Balatro and like done like 4 or 5 reviews. I'm just like, oh, tired.
Break.
But Elden Ring, I'm just waiting for Elden Ring now.
So I want to jump into a couple questions from the question block. But before we do that, I'm going to remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of June. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all the real, so the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go above and beyond to show your support just like they did, if you want to write into the show for the question block, or if you want to go check out our sister shows, Nintendo Noise and the Steam Deck podcast, you can find links to all that and much more over on our website. That's flipscreen.games. Head over there and click on some stuff. It helps us out a lot more than it costs you. So we got a couple questions about Summer Game Fest I want to jump into real quick. This first one is one that comes from Left on the Discord, who said, "Do you find yourself underwhelmed more and more by cinematic trailers? I feel like I'm losing more and more care for these big events because everything is a movie trailer that tells me nothing."
yeah, yeah. I hate them. They don't tell you what the game is. Sometimes you get bait and switch, like with the June game that we mentioned on the last episode, where you think it's one game and everyone's really excited. We had the same thing happen at the PlayStation event, and then it was a 5v5 shooter, and it's just like, it's great. Cinematic trailers are good, and I think they
Hold
serve a
on. That one's not a bait and switch. People just don't want that to be that game. That game has, like, that's part of the content.
yeah, but fair enough. It doesn't, but something like Diablo 4, for example, right, or World of
Right.
Warcraft that we saw,
Yeah.
those games don't look anything like those trailers, and they don't play anything like those trailers,
Mhm.
and you maybe see that and you don't know what it is, and you get excited about it, and then you find out it's Diablo, or you
Yeah.
find out it's World of Warcraft, and you're just like, oh, okay,
Yeah, I'm with
Yeah,
you with that kind of thing, where it just it doesn't add much. I think there are certain games that can get away with it. I think if you're like talking about, you know, revealing like a new IP or something, or like you're bringing a classic IP back and
the
you
Wolverine CGI trailer, I think that was a pretty good example of
as a
one that was
reveal,
worked. Yeah,
great
yeah,
tease, right?
hmm. There was a trailer this week, God, it was the Gears of War D-Day one. The
E-Day.
E-Day, sorry, it came out 3 days after D-Day, you're right. There was a, tweet where I think Jeff Keighley had said about it being a CGI trailer using elements of the game from, Unreal Engine 5, and then one of the devs was like, "No, that's like you've really downplayed that. That's it. That's in engine in Unreal 5. That's all like the amount of work that's gone into that, and you're saying it's a CGI trailer, and I guess it looks like a CGI trailer, but surely that's the sort of thing you want to highlight. Is
Yeah, yeah,
this
and I
is
think
not a
they did in
CGI
the
trailer? Oh,
presentation.
okay.
It
So
said at the bottom, like, Xbox did a really great job, and I think they deserve credit for it, that every single trailer they showed, it said whether it was a
Yeah.
cinematic, whether it was a blend of cinematics and gameplay,
mhm,
or whether it was in-engine, and it explicitly said that that was in-engine, and Jeff got community noted on that tweet. I saw that one.
good. Okay, good.
And like that's a great example for me of like I don't find those to be um you know I don't find those to be the same thing. Like, I think that's a way different type of presentation. Like, I'm with you where like seeing a cool Dune cinematic for like an MMO like is very much like this to me just isn't it, right? It doesn't inspire much for me because I mean, partly I think we're biased because we don't like those kinds of games. So you're going to be
But I love
disappointed,
Diablo. I love Diablo,
right?
and even for me, that does nothing. It does absolutely nothing for me, and I wanna see the gameplay. I wanna see the character that you're introducing and what they do and what their class introduces to the game, and not just a little bit of story narrative and, what they look like pretty in a cinematic that it's never gonna look like in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That kind of thing I think like has its place, but I don't want to see it in a presentation like this. Cuz like I always like Blizzard cinematics for what they are. but, like, they're a marketing beat. It's like it's something to, like, add lore and everything if you care, which is cool, but, I mean, you're saying that you do and you don't, right? But, you know, um, I think if you're putting that up on, like, Twitter or your YouTube channel or something, it's, like, a way easier thing to be like, "This is for the fans, so let's put it up for the
Yeah,
fans."
yeah.
But when you are, like, in the middle of a 2-hour presentation and you're like, it's high caliber announcement, like, it does leave a taste in your mouth. I think that just, like, it's
Mhm.
kinda like, "Alright, like, what am I supposed to take away from that?"
And you get no idea what the gameplay is, even with the Gears of War E-Day presentation, right? The fact that we know what Gears is, it enables that trailer
See,
to, I
and, like,
think,
that's
be
what I was
possible.
saying when it's, like, an established franchise or something like that, it's like, I don't really care. Like, I don't care that Gears didn't show me gameplay. Do I really need to see gameplay of what Gears of War looks like? It's looked the same since the first one, more or less,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, when we're closer to it and you wanna show more of the nuance of what's changed for the folks that, like, fuck with Gears of War, great. But, like, for what that is, where you're just announcing, "Hey, there's a new Gears of War, and it's not gonna be Gears 6, it's gonna be a prequel," right? Like, that's all the information that I really need right now,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? And
Right,
and I
right now. But I distinctly remember
right
having
now.
conversations with you about, like, Tears of the Kingdom, and it was eking ever closer and closer and closer to the release date, and we're like, "I don't know anything about this game."
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
are they ever gonna show us what the gameplay's like
Which
and
is
how it
also though, like,
differs from Breath of the Wild?
I ultimately, I think that was the right call. It was way
Mhm.
cooler to not have any of that spoiled and to just go in and be like, "Holy crap, like, there's this whole other there's this whole element to the world that they never talked about," right? Like, you never heard about the underground until, reviews came out, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's hot. Like, that's awesome that you did that because you could, because it was a sequel
Yeah.
to the most
And
popular game on your console, right? Like, great.
yeah, and Nintendo has that power to do that, I guess. I guess, but so does World of Warcraft. What am I saying? Like Blizzard don't have to stoop
See,
to
and, like,
not
to
stoop to
me,
it.
that was one where that felt more motivated by, like, them planting their flag and that we own Warcraft now, and, like, this
Mhm.
would have been at BlizzCon, now it's here,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think yeah, like,
They even put a tweet out about it afterwards. It was, I think Blizzard was so it was great to be there with the whole Xbox and
yeah.
Activision family and Bethesda family,
Which
like
to me, like, that even makes more sense rather than, like, the Diablo thing, which is like, well, Diablo is, like, already on Game Pass. We've already did this. This moment has already happened, right? Like, maybe focus on the content, right? Rather than just cool animation, you know? Admittedly, a cool animation, but how much
yeah,
is
they
that
do have a
really.
really good cinematics team at
Yeah,
Blizzard.
and it's like, that's cool, but it's like, we need a little bit more than that, I think, for especially for something like that, where it's like it's an expansion to a game that's already out, it's already on Game Pass, like, there's no other headline here other than new content is coming. Great. Show me a little bit, right? More than just telling. All right, so then the next question comes from Andrew Valentine, who wrote in and said, "What did you think was the best all-around showcase in terms of format, variety, and perceived quality of games and all-around vibes?" It was uh, Steve's moving stuff around in a document, messing me up.
Sorry.
In terms of all-around vibes and everything, right? It was Day of the Devs for me. Chill, unobstructive hosts introducing nice, funny devs to talk about their fun and interesting looking games.
I missed Day of the Devs this year. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I've always liked that format. I also really missed this year the Xbox Extended Showcase format for that same reason, where it's a one-on-one interview, usually with Sarah Bond, and she's talking with the devs, and they're clearly really passionate about their games. And I do think that's something that I've missed from E3. That was Jeff's job back then, right? He was there. He was the man in the studio. He was talking to the devs. He was there, like, getting extra little tidbits out here and there. And we do get that at Gamescom. Like we saw Phil Spencer doing that last year at Gamescom, talking about the Baldur's Gate 3 debacle.
You
But
do still see some of that stuff, right? Because it's like,
Jeff Grubb's been doing some, yeah.
well, and I tease it at the top, but we're gonna have to save this for the Steam Deck podcast now because we ended up going longer on the Ubisoft stuff than I expected. But Phil talked about the Xbox handheld, right? But that was like at
Yeah.
IGN Live's thing, and that has always been a staple of E3, right? It was like IGN would have their booth or like GameSpot, like would have a thing where they would have devs and celebrities and stuff coming through and chatting, and you get these like little tiny interview segments and maybe gameplay, stuff like you said, like the Xbox.
Yeah, like the Nintendo Treehouse as well. I always like
Exactly, that
those at events
format.
as well. Yeah, they were cool. I really like that format. But
I love the treehouse.
I think for me, the showcase I always look forward to the most is is either Xbox, and this year I think they really kind of outdone themselves. But I love the Devolver one. It's always so funny.
Yeah,
Um,
it's got a good vibe.
it's always got a good vibe. They don't take themselves too seriously, and they always have a good collection of games there.
I
So
missed
yeah,
it this year. Did they still have the whole, like, running theme of that
Volvy's still
corporate
there.
woman? Oh, it's Volvi, not the corporate woman that died, got computerized.
No, I think it
No?
was Volvy again
Okay.
this year. I haven't like, had a
I
chance to
haven't
watch
caught
it
that one
either.
yet. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm still catching up on a couple of the ones from this past week that I haven't seen. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's yeah, like I think it's unquestionably Xbox took it this year. I mean, obviously, like Day of the Devs is very cool, and I can totally understand why you would have more fun watching something like that just for like the presentation of it. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to E3, Summer Game Fest, like these type of big presentations, like Xbox's event this year was what I show up for, right? It's like I want that 10 out of 10 presentation, like, you know, good pacing with a lot of high caliber reveals and updates on games that we already know about and getting that kind of like, okay, here's what's imminent, right? Like here's what you can look forward to in the next couple months, here's what you can look forward to in the next couple of years, and here's what we're working on for the more distant future. Like that's what I want out of one of those big presentations, and like Xbox just came so correct with that. And then obviously having the Call of Duty like deep dive developer, kind of touch base as like the sister piece to that. I think, was really, really effective as well, even though I'm not a Call
Mhm.
of Duty guy. I think they really just they did a great job of juggling all of the many, many hats that they now kind of have to be able to switch between. And like you got a big moment from Activision, you got a big moment from Blizzard, you got multiple big moments from uh the Bethesda studios, like and some of the internal, Xbox game studios as well. So it's like I think aside from a few games that we haven't heard about in a really long time because I think their development has been a little tumultuous. We got to check in on pretty much every big game that we've been looking forward to from them, and I thought almost all of them looked exceptional, right? Even the ones that are not for me, I think showed really, really well, and most of it had gameplay or in-engine capture or stuff that was like this is tangible and feels real and imminent and looks quality rather than some of the smoke and mirrors feels like harsh, but the marketing material that we've gotten for some of these
Mhm.
games in years past, where it's like, in theory, I love the idea of Arcane making a vampire game. Obviously, that didn't turn out right. Like Starfield was a lot of promises, and then a stumble out the gate. I think even though Steve and I at least right have gone to bat for that game more than most. Uh, I think a lot of this stuff, like Indiana Jones, even though I don't think it's coming out this year, it looks very done. It looks very realized and very like, okay, this is what it is, right? Like, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of question marks about whether it's going to stick the landing. And who knows? Maybe it'll come out and disappoint. But I think a lot of these games look like they're pretty safe bets right now, which is the first time in a long time where I felt that way about Xbox. As much as we've said maybe this will be the year, maybe that'll be the year, if these next 2 years pan out, they've got a lot of stuff to look forward to. Even if half of them pan out, it'll be the best year and change that they've had since the release of the Series X. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that combined with the tease of the next gen console again, and then what Phil Spencer's follow-up at IGN Low, I think it is potentially an exciting time for Xbox again. And I think, I'd kind of written them off a little bit after some of the
Yeah.
decisions they'd made of recent, closures of beloved studios and terrible game releases and things like that. I do think they can probably come back, especially with, PlayStation not really outputting or delivering much this year either.
It's theirs just to fumble really at this point. isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, well said. Anybody else have one that they wanted to highlight, or do we all agree that Xbox was the shit?
Xbox. I was going to say Xbox presentation. What are your guys' games of the whole show? Like so. I know that we've spoken about games from personally from the
Yeah.
Forward, like the show specifically. What about like of the entire show? What game has got
I
you the most
mean,
jazzed?
for me, it's like definitely Dragon Age,
Hmm.
Mm.
Veilguard. Like we're gonna do a extra short about that you can go check out right now. It's up already. But yeah, I'm very excited for that game. It is one of my favorite franchises, and it's had a super tumultuous development and like layoffs and all this stuff. And it really looks like it's gonna come out and deliver exactly what me and other longtime fans want from that franchise. So, um, yeah, cautiously, I think that's like the most excited I am for anything right now. And if it sticks to landing, I think, has really exciting implications for the future of BioWare as a studio, who's also been, through a really tough generation and change. It's been a long time since they put out a game that felt up to
Like a
their
BioWare game.
yeah, like yeah, exactly. And there's a whole new generation of developers there that have like come in growing up on the games that I love, and this feels so much like how do we do that as a next gen title? And can't wait.
My game of Summer Games Fest is Just Dance VR. I really can't.
It's in the pre-show. They didn't even put it in the main show. Just Dance is over.
No Jason Derulo either. That was such a disappointment for Ubisoft.
Just Dance is dead.
No, I think for me, there's contention between a few, but I think the one I'm most excited about that's coming out in, close proximity to now is probably Star Wars Outlaws.
Let's go.
We've got a solid release date on it now. We know when it's coming. It looks phenomenal, both from an aesthetic point of view and also from just like gameplay elements. I think it looks like the kind of thing I love. It's got those kind of immersive sim, stealthy moments in there, as well as also some more action-packed elements as well. And I think it's going to be a really good time.
Cool. I actually don't know what mine is. Now I've asked it this. There's a few games that like I'm keen on. A couple of new ones. The new one from Devolver. No, well, yeah, Devolver, but the Heart Machine, Possessors, I think it was called. That looks really interesting. The new one from people that made Grease. I think that one's called. Don't know. Never. I think that's called
Yeah,
actually. Like, there's a
it's
couple. A few games that that are new ones that are smaller ones. I don't think there's like maybe Monster Hunter Rise because it's a game I've been waiting to hear more about since it was first announced at the Game Awards. While I don't think the trailers are very good, I do think there's a lot of promise there, and I'm very keen to hear more. So bring on Gamescom, then we can finally talk about some more video games. That'd be nice. Actually, see what? No, bring on Nintendo Direct.
yes,
Bring on the
Nintendo
June
Direct.
Bring on
Nintendo
the
Direct.
Nintendo Direct, baby. I'm
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
Awesome, gang. Well, thank you for joining us here on another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. If you want to write in and let us know what your favorite presentation was, what your game of the entire Summer Game Fest was, we'd love to hear from you. Get in touch in all the ways that I talked about before, all of which you can find over at flipscreen.games. Head over there, click on some stuff, however you choose to get involved and show your support. It helps us out a lot more than it costs you, and we greatly appreciate you tuning into the show and being a part of the community. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. He's been Steve. Oh, he's been Max. Oh, he's been Max. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.